And welcome back. Tonight I am going to be reading another chapter of The Other World by Swansea 515. It has been quite a while since I've gotten to read the last chapter due to everything that had been going on. So this can be found on Fanfiction. I forget if it's .org or .com or what, but you can find it on Fanfiction, fanfiction.net maybe. The link will be provided down below. So, The Other World by Swansea 515. Chapter 2. What Chihiro Has Become. Haku's heart pounded in his ears. After she'd left the spirit world, a spell on the purple hair tie Zeniba gave her had allowed Zeniba to find her wherever she went in the human world. They had watched her begin to settle into her new school. She did not remember her experiences in the spirit world. She retained the confidence she had gained, but the gate between the worlds had done its job. In her new home and at her new school, she worked hard and seemed happy enough, though it was clear she hadn't made many friends. Then one day she disappeared. The spell showed a dark place. For some reason she'd stopped wearing the hair tie. She may even have thrown it away. It was as if she'd disappeared off the face of the earth. She had been 12. And now, somehow, Zeniba had found her. Haku landed in front of Zeniba's cottage. The old woman was at the door waiting for him. The light and warmth of the hearth lay beyond, but Haku was afraid. For 5 years he dreamt of her, the Chihiro that he knew. He had told Tenryu that she had no doubt changed, and he knew that she had, consciously. A lot happens between 12 and 18, but still he hoped he would know her. He even hoped, irrationally, that she would know him. He had too much hope not to be afraid. He walked into the living room. Zeniba greeted him warmly. He replied with his own greeting. She continued to talk, but in Haku's mind the sounds coming from her mouth had no meaning. His attention was taken up by the magical window hanging in the air above the table. A spell. Zeniba must have scanned the entire town to find her, he thought. At first, Haku was afraid there had been some mistake. The window was dark, but then a screen lit up in the room beyond the window, illuminating a dozen teenaged humans piled onto a couple of couches and a low table covered with food and glass bottles, as well as half-filled glasses. One girl was standing, microphone in hand, her swaying figure silhouetted by the bright screen where the words were crawling across the bottom. There was no sound, but Haku could almost smell the alcohol on her breath. Zeniba came to stand behind him. She gestured, and the view shifted so that they could see the faces of the young men and women sitting and standing there, illuminated by the light from the screen. Haku cried out and stumbled back. The faces were blinding white, and there were glittering voids where the eyes should be. Were they sick? He looked closer. The girls had painted their faces and were improbably dressed, some in cloth that was practically transparent in the harsh light of the screen, others in spiked shoes and stomach-bearing tops in blinding colors. In the twilight, they looked like mannequins. Chihiro can't possibly be among them, Haku thought. He tried desperately to find a girl that stood out from the others. The window moved toward the face of one of the female mannequins. She was holding a half-empty glass in one hand and was laughing and shouting with the rest. She had short, dark hair, waved to look windblown and gelled to the nines, with a blonde streak on one side. Her face filled the magical window as her green-tipped fingers raised her glass to her darkened lips, and Haku recognized her. Behind the exaggerated plastic eyelashes, those big brown eyes were Chihiro's eyes. Haku held his breath as he stared at the image. What did the human world do to her? Then Zeniba's words from minutes ago finally registered. "What did you say?" he said. "It's possible," Zeniba said. "The worlds are still connected in some secret places. I've known for some time now, but I didn't want to get your hopes up, Haku. There was no use telling you if we couldn't find her." "Get my hopes up!" Haku exclaimed. "It's possible to cross the border?" Then, intently, "Tell me how." "Yes, it is time," Zeniba said. "Watch carefully." "Now?" Haku said, taken aback. "I can see Chihiro now?" The image of that china face with its painted cheeks and lips, inhuman eyelashes, and stiff bobbed hair filled his mind. Except for the eyes. He had recognized those eyes. Maybe he would recognize other things. He felt Zeniba place a hand in his arm and push the troubling thoughts away, leaving the excitement bubbling under his skin in its place. The vision of a spring appeared in his mind. Through the eyes of a fish, he sank beneath the surface and against the current deeper and deeper into the source of the spring. The tunnel around him narrowed until he squeezed through a small hole in the rock. And then, like an hourglass, it widened dramatically. The vision rose until it broke the surface of the water on the other side. Haku was incredulous. There had been a break in the barrier beneath the spring this whole time. "Do you see where it is?" Zeniba asked. "Yes," Haku said. "Then it is time for you to go. Remember, when Chihiro passed through the gate, the spell I placed on her hair tie sealed her memories into the realm of dreams, away from her consciousness to keep them safe. Without the charm, the curse would not only prevent her from ever remembering, she would hate anything that triggers those memories. You must be careful. She must not remember you." Zeniba beckoned and led Haku through the house and out the paneled back doors into the swamp. Haku emerged from the lake on the human side of the barrier, exhausted. The current had been stronger than the vision. The current had been stronger than the vision that had led him up to believe, and it had taken hours to cross. The sky on the human side was gray with the false dawn. Haku pulled himself into a clump of bushes and fell into an uneasy sleep. Sunrise woke him. It was the wrong color, and the edges of the sun were soft, like he was seeing it through the piece of glass. Haku shuddered and sat up. The air felt thicker. He looked at the surface of the lake that had hid beneath it a hole in the barrier between the worlds, and frowned. The water rippled. The ground was trembling. Is there a territory dispute with the local spirits? Haku wondered. Who could it be? The smell of human musk led him uphill through the trees, away from the acrid fumes of the road, until he could see a row of houses beyond the trees. He watched groups of children pass, younger ones and older ones, and then there she was, walking with a group of girls all wearing the same T-shirts and pleated skirts, no doubt a uniform of some kind. He quickly stepped behind a tree to avoid being seen. Her face was no longer as round as he remembered. The delicate skin hugged the cheekbones more tightly now, but it was still familiar. Her face was shockingly pale, her eyelids and eyelashes a deep blue whenever she blinked, and her lips were flamboyantly red, as if someone had replaced her face with a flesh-colored canvas and then had painted the features back on. She wore her hair in a bob that hung to her chin. One rose gold lock peeked out from beneath her bangs by one ear. Some young men turned a corner into the street. The two groups merged. A few couples moved to the periphery of the group and began to kiss loudly. Haku withdrew his gaze in disgust. His eyes fell back on Chihiro, who was bantering with a taller boy with a puffed chest while smacking on a piece of gum. She smirked and rolled her eyes in response to something he said, and the group shrieked with laughter. The boy looked disgruntled. Haku suppressed the fear that was welling up inside and inspected the boys' uniforms and waved a hand over his white knee-length kimono. It now looked like a black jacket and tie over a white collared shirt with black slacks. Easy enough. His face had lengthened in the last few years, but he was still recognizable. Still, he wanted to show Chihiro a face that was his own. With a sigh, he reached up and tied back his shoulder-length hair. When the next group of boys passed, he left the shelter of the trees and followed them at a distance to the school. With the help of a little magic, he talked his way past the school administrators and into the classroom. The time he had spent at the bathhouse as a witch's apprentice had some use after all. He was disappointed to find that the boys and girls attended separate schools, but it wasn't long before he heard someone mention Chihiro's name. Humans are so obvious, Haku thought. Do they realize they haven't filtered their odors? His nose was able to pick out every base emotion the boys emitted by scent. It didn't take long for him to insert himself into the most influential group of young men, a gang led by Kane, the boy Chihiro had spoken with before school. They were too easy to read. But by the end of the day, his sensitive nose and ears had been so overwhelmed that they felt numb. He lagged behind as they left the schoolyard, cajoled into staying in the group by Kane. And then there she was again, in the fenced lawn of the girls' school, talking to the long-haired girl next to her. Haku's heart thumped against his ribcage. The salty, metallic smell of human females filled his nose as the girls swarmed out of the schoolyard. The air around them grew warm with the heat of so many bodies crowded together. Haku lost sight of Chihiro immediately. The girls all looked the same in their uniforms, with their faces hidden behind the boys' taller forms. He looked around. Kane had disappeared too. Everyone was talking at once, warm bodies pressed in on every side. Haku imagined his senses frying. Haku scanned the faces around him, trying to hold off the dizziness. He finally spotted Kane, leaning against the cast-iron gate. He had his arms snaked around Chihiro's waist possessively and whispering in her ear. She laughed and pushed his arm playfully. Haku's heart sank. He began to wade through the sea of flesh toward her. The crowd pushed his back helpfully. Chihiro's long-haired friend elbowed her as Haku approached. She turned around. Haku saw her gaze explore his face curiously. He was almost a full head taller than she was, and she had to tilt her head to see his face at this close proximity. Haku looked from her long, skinny legs showing below her short skirt to her lime green fingernails, to her face, which was still painted, but not freakishly so. The air reeked of testosterone and sweat. He wanted to gag. He held his breath and bowed slightly. She blushed. "My name is Kohaku," he said. "I'm pleased to make your acquaintance." Chihiro's eyes widened. For a second, he allowed himself to hope that maybe she recognized him. But then she bowed back, and when she straightened, the moment of uncertainty had passed. "My name is Ogino," she said, raising her voice to be heard above the din. "Chihiro Ogino, pleased to meet you." It was hard to concentrate on her words. The voices of the crowd battered at his ears. Her words replayed in his mind. Her voice was so formal, so polite. The blonde lock of hair swayed in the wind. Where was the little girl with the bright eyes? "Chihiro," Haku began to say. He couldn't begin to bring himself by her last name, after all she'd done for him, all they'd done together. He couldn't pretend that he didn't know her. It would make it real. If only he could explain, surely she would understand. "Let me take you somewhere I can think straight." Kane glared at Haku and interrupted. "Let's go, Chihiro," he said, and tried to pull her away. His body exuded the smell of adrenaline. Haku barely stopped himself from slapping Kane's hand away from Chihiro. "Don't be a jerk, Kane. Let me talk to him," Chihiro protested. Does she forgive my rudeness? Haku thought. Do you know him? Kane demanded. I don't think so, Chihiro said thoughtfully. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, her voice jumped up an octave. Nope, definitely not. But he's cute, she teased. Her voice seared Haku's ears. He grimaced inside. She flashed a smile toward Haku while looking at Kane. Kane ignored this jibe. Then he has no right to address you by your first name, Kane said. Come on, we're going to my place tonight, remember? Place? His home? What is she doing there? Haku's thoughts swirled. He couldn't keep them coherent. There was a slight hesitation. Subconscious thought passed, perhaps, like a cool breeze. But before Haku could do anything, Chihiro turned around and called, Yumi! Akari! Movie night at Kane's, let's go! A few of the girls and boys emerged from the crowd, bantering and chattering about home theaters and actors and clothes. Without the magnetism of the popular kids holding it together, the group dispersed in every direction. Haku was left standing there, shell-shocked and ears ringing, looking in the direction that Chihiro had disappeared in. Her last words still echoed in his ears. She had not once looked back. Wow, a voice said dryly. Haku turned around and looked down. It was Chihiro's friend. The girl was in the same uniform that the others wore, and she was the same age as the others. But there was something different about her. Is it because she isn't wearing any makeup? Haku thought. But it seemed to be something more fundamental than that. Then Haku realized that the oppressive and musky smell of humans, which had nauseated him all day, had almost completely diffused. He looked at the girl in surprise. Who is she? And what is she doing here? She couldn't be human. You really shook her, the girl commented, seemingly oblivious to Haku's surprise. What do you mean? Haku asked. I mean Chihiro, of course, the girl said, nonchalant. Don't think I didn't notice that you were staring at her the entire time. Her acting is usually better than it was today. I mean, did you hear her voice jump? What a mess! Acting? Haku said. The girl laughed happily. I'm Rizuni Shinkono, she said. She looked up and smiled a genuine smile at Haku. You're new in town, aren't you? Shall I show you around? Haku leafed through the silk-bound copy of the Kojiki in astonishment. Someone had put a lot of time and magic into the volume he held in his hands. The technique was impeccable. The spell had been woven so that it lay dormant in the spine's binding, adding and revising to the tale written in the pages as the history played out. That girl, Rizuni, knew about this? Haku thought. There wasn't much to the small town that Chihiro lived in. Rizuni had shown him around the parks, the small mall, and other public spaces, telling him stories as they went, and had ended her tour at the library. She had left him there and gone home. Haku's eyes had been drawn to the enchanted tome immediately. The library was still, the smells muted. Haku felt the small hairs standing on his human-formed skin begin to settle for the first time that day. He flipped back to the beginning of the book, to the creation story, to read the book properly. Haku didn't know how long he'd been standing there, when suddenly he was aware of heat emanating from where the bookshelves met the aisle, and a breath being held. He looked up. Chihiro stood there, looking stunned. She was still in her school uniform and makeup. There was something incongruous about her flamboyant appearance in a quiet place like the library. Chihiro, Haku said, feeling just as stunned. I didn't expect to see anyone here. Belatedly, he remembered to bow. As far as she knew, they had met for the first time earlier that day. Hi, Chihiro stammered. Me neither. I was actually looking for that. She pointed to the book in his hands. Her neck and ears turned pink with heat. Haku looked down at the book he still held in his hands. She was looking for this? Does she realize what this is? He closed the book and handed it to her. Have you read this? He asked. Yeah, it's from a history paper. She stared down at her shoes. She seemed embarrassed for some reason. There was none of the confident manner that she had embodied earlier that day. It's a very unusual anthology, Haku said. I don't know if you realized that. Could she possibly remember? Could the gate have had no effect on her? She slowly opened the book to the first page of the creation story and looked up at him. He nodded slowly. He could see her pulse rising in the exposed artery in her neck. His own heart was pounding, and he wondered briefly if she could see it the way he could. He was afraid. She was so close to remembering and so close to the war. Maybe she caught his fear because she gulped. There you are, Chihiro! Razuni's head poked into the aisle, startling them both. Oh, I should have known. Why didn't you pick up your phone? I only called you, 8 million times. Then she saw that Kohaku was standing there with Chihiro. Oh, sorry. Am I interrupting something? I'll leave you guys to it. Don't mind me. She grinned at Chihiro. Chihiro glared back. It's not like that, she protested. Haku looked from Razuni to Chihiro. Their expressions seemed to be saying something in a secret language, one unreadable to Haku. That's not necessary, he said. I was just about to leave. It was nice seeing you both. He bowed to them and left. Razuni turned to watch him go, winking and smiling at him once her back with Chihiro. As he left, he heard her say to Chihiro, It's getting late, so I'll let you off the hook today. But you are telling me everything when you come over tomorrow. The smile slipped off Haku's face as the door of the library closed behind him. Beneath his feet, the ground was trembling again. The water streamed down Haku's sides as he emerged from the spring. The water seemed to flee from his hair and clothes as he transformed, scales melting away into skin and cloth. He trudged toward the house and slid open the paper-screened doors. He had stayed here for a year after he left the bathhouse, and after he had left, Zeniba had kept the room furnished for him. He could hear her bustling around beyond the closed door that led to the rest of the house. Night was when spirits were up and about, but he was too tired for conversation. The exhaustion from crossing the borders between the worlds in this way had drained him, but was minor still compared to a day in the presence of human teenagers. His ears felt raw from the stimulation of so many voices. You'd think that after the bathhouse, how do humans deal with, and to think it was in the spring all that time? His mind jumped from thought to thought, but many of them were left trailing off. His weariness was deep, and left him without energy to follow the trains of thought to their conclusions. He lay on the bed, staring up into the darkness of the ceiling. In his human form, the ceiling disappeared into the darkness except where shreds of moonlight illuminated it. He could almost pretend he was looking down into the deep. What is it like to be, instead of just to see? Where is the part of me which is still missing? And he thought of Chihiro, whose voice had rung out without effort, but others ran to obey, whose face and smile radiated confidence and detachment, who held herself like royalty and need notice no one. And then there was the other Chihiro, the one who looked down and spoke softly but eagerly, the one who was a child, and the other girl, the one who wasn't human. She said Chihiro was acting. But why? And which Chihiro is the real one? He meant to think about it more, but the day had been overwhelming. And soon the darkness of the room faded behind the darkness of his eyelids, and he fell asleep. Zeniba saw Haku rise from the spring and stagger into the house, and she sighed. She couldn't speak to the swamp water like the dragons could, but she had been out there every day for centuries, and her senses told her that things were still not right. She had built her house here when she realized that the worlds were still connected here beneath the rock. And at first, she had thought that the wrongness in the swamp was because the lake was polluted on the human side. But the small silver fish that used this point to cross the border told her it wasn't so. They told her that it was because the lake was dead. For a long time, she could not understand how this was so. The lake existed and things lived in it, so how could it be dead? But its spirit had never awakened. And she saw that the problem was more widespread than Swamp Bottom. There were many such dead places. And then, 7 years ago, Haku showed up at her door. Rivers had been destroyed by humans before. The spirits of those rivers had died. Haku survived. He seemed to have no memories of his past and only the most rudimentary of a dragon's magic, but he was alive. Zeniba had hoped that the spring would adopt Haku as its spirit, and that it would heal him in the process. Haku had been reluctant, but had also wanted to please her, and so for the year that he had stayed with her, she had watched him go out there every night to sit in the waters, letting his magic flow out over the surface. Nothing had ever come of it. Even so, he's grown up, she thought. Of all of Nihonkai's sons, he has the most potential, even now. A fleet shadow suddenly darted across the face of the moon, catching her attention. Then another, and another. It looked like a flock of swan geese migrating in a V, but it was the wrong time of year. Something is wrong, she thought, and almost immediately, one of the goose spirits faltered and dropped. 4 of the others dove to help their sister and then flew back up to the flock, supporting the injured goose with their backs and necks. They flew on out of sight toward Avaraya. And there ends chapter 2. I will read the interlude and then chapter 3 next time. Good night. It's bedtime.